humanity has colonized the solar system. Jim Holden is the ex-ho of an ice hauler, making runs from the rings of Saturn to the asteroid cities of the belt. Out in the darkness, they detect a distress signal and move to investigate. And when they get there, Holden goes out with an away team and finds the dead ship, the Scopuli, that seems to have been boarded with military precision. While they're away, a stealth ship fires nuclear torpedoes at the ice hauler, destroys it. Holden and his team are the only survivors. All the evidence points to the Martian military, and a system-wide war threatens to break out unless Holden can find out who set the trap and why. Meanwhile, Miller is a detective on Ceres, and he's looking for a girl. When the trail leads him to the Scopuli and Holden, they realize that this girl may be the key to everything. Holden and Miller must thread the needle between the Earth government, the outer planet revolutionaries, the Martian military, and secretive corporations, and the odds are against them. But out in the belt, the rules are different, and one small ship can change the fate of the universe.
Hello, everybody. I'm Cody.
And I'm Brent.
And we are the Hugonauts, here to review and discuss with you the best sci-fi novels of all time. This week we are talking about The Expanse, particularly book 1 through 3, because reading 9 books a piece was too many for one single episode. So we'll do 4 through 6 and 7 through 9 at some point in the future as their own episodes. But the Expanse novels, at least 1 through 3, are about 550 to 600 pages, or about 20 hours on audiobook each. And they were published between 2011 and 2013. And they're very fun and good.
For sure. And next episode in 2 weeks is the timeless space horror Solaris by Stanislaw Lem. So don't forget to like and subscribe or download, follow, however you listen or watch us, so you do not miss out on spooky space horror and aliens that you don't expect.
Yes, super stoked to do Solaris by Stanislaw Lem. That's going to be a really fun one to talk about. Classic for a reason, and a little something different, a little different sweet treat. But back to The Expanse, books 1 through 3, at least. I'm giving them a 4 out of 5 overall. I think they're just impeccably well-written action novels that are totally page-turning and have a very compelling vision of the near future solar system of humanity.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Yeah. Also 4 out of 5. The action scenes are just so good. There's so many sections. We're just like really excited to keep moving, you know? So yeah. And what was your favorite? What was your favorite book of these first 3?
My favorite was book 3. That was a 4.5 out of 5. Brought the average up a little bit. I just loved how we finally got the macro scale of things.
For sure. Yeah, we'll have to talk more about that in post spoilers. Because yeah, I agree with you. The reveals were cool. I think my favorite was book 1, just because the world and the universe, I guess the solar system that's been created here is like so fun, and just like walking through it, reading through it for the first time was just like kind of unforgettable for me. I really, really liked it. So yeah.
All right. I could see that. I liked them all. So win some, lose some. No major disagreements here. First things first, let's just say something that everyone already probably knows, which is that James S. A. Corey is a nom de plume for 2 authors, Ty Frank and Daniel Abraham, who co-wrote the series. So when we refer to the author, it's really 2 people.
Yeah, but we're just going to keep saying author because that's too hard to remember. And also they signed up for that by doing this. So yeah. Sorry, James S. A. Corey, that's who you are now.
Right.
Interesting note, they actually are also writers and producers like on the show though. And they've also they write like a lot of like extremely high production value, like sci-fi stuff that you've heard of. They're like a Star Wars novel, and they like wrote stuff they made like a graphic novel for George R.R. Martin. They're just like high production value, speculative writers for hire. And I don't mean for hire, that's not disparagement. But yeah, anyway.
They're good at writing, and that's why they get hired so much.
Yes.
And why are they good at writing, Brent?
I think the thing that makes these stands out, like there's a scene in the first book, a really long sequence. It's not just a scene that happens on Eros, which is a really big asteroid in the asteroid belt. And it's a straight up, action scene, and you won't be surprised to hear there's gunfights and there's other things you're finding out about. But the thing that made it so exciting and memorable for me is just that the pacing is really, really well done. And unlike lots of other, action style books out there, there are times when you're not actually sure quite what's going to happen. They're like successfully revealing stuff at the same time the action is ongoing, and I think that's pretty rare. And they're just really, really good at it. So like that scene on Eros, I'll remember forever. I think that's a big part of why that first book is my favorite.
There are a lot of moments of, real literary emotion and humanity that are brought to the page. These little, flashback moments, or the metaphors they choose to describe things are just really powerful and help you empathize as the reader with the scenario, whether it's combat or a relationship or what have you, without it just kind of coming across as these are the facts. These characters are in a relationship, or like this is what's happening in the action scene that you get a lot with the action writing. It makes you feel with the characters what they're feeling. And I think that's why Ty Fringan, James S.A. Corey, why they're so successful in achieving a next level action adventure book.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and they do some interesting stuff on that point of like narrative technique. So everything is told like linearly. But they do split perspectives. There's always Holden and then like another main character. They never start the book together. They always meet up halfway through. And while when I say never and always, that maybe seems like it'll be boring and you're like, oh yeah, that's like every other book I've ever read, but it's just executed well. And it's exciting when they get together, even though it's going to happen. It's still great. And then the other thing that they do that's interesting, even though it's linear, they have there's no like flashbacks, but there's a lot of like the character remembering something in their past to like help explain their motivation. And so maybe like the higher literary way to do it is to like split timelines and have us confused about what time period's happening or whatever. Here, that's never the case. It's always just like easy to understand, but they're doing all that same stuff to help you get inside the characters' minds and understand their motivations.
The other thing that really brought me in, at least I think they do really well, is their villains are very good, morally gray people. They have good reasons to be bad and think they're being good, or just maybe they're not. They know they're not being good, but they want to do it anyways. But they're more nuanced than a lot of villains I've read, and have and are super believable.
Yeah, and they also like hide the bag quite a lot. Like pretty commonly, you like won't know who the bad guy is for a long time, and so then there's a chance you'd be let down when you meet them. You will not be, don't worry. So anyway.
Yeah. So speaking of some characters, obviously we have Holden. He's the central force here. But who else is on the team? Who's on the squad with Holden in the ship, in the Rocinante?
Yeah, so it's a crew of 4. So it's him and Naomi. She's his second in command, and she's like the technical expert on the ship. She's writing software and also hardware. Anyway, Naomi does a lot. She's extraordinarily smart. Amos is like the bruiser guy. He's like fixing manual, he's like doing like manual labor on the ship, and then doing a lot of murders. And he's very good at it. Amos is fun. I like him. And he also is like unapologetically like, I'm not normally a good guy, but I'm a good guy because Holden's here. And so I'm like using my murders for good. But just so you know, I'd be fine to do any kind of murders. It's just like an interesting, I like him.
Yeah, Holden is a great, kind of toe the line of justice and his beliefs, really strictly character. You see that done a lot of times, and it feels like they're too altruistic, but he's not necessarily altruistic. It gets him in a lot of trouble too, to be so honest and to care so much about justice. So he feels like a believable guy who's also good and trying to do the best.
Yeah, for sure. And the last member of the crew is Alex, the pilot, who honestly I don't have to say that much about. I feel like he's kind of like the least fleshed out of the core 4.
He's got a West Texas accent.
That's right. Yeah, he's from the Mariner Valley and speaks with a West Texas accent, which you will hear many times. But despite the fact that you hear that many times, that is not actually character development. But anyway,
Right. And then you have the ancillary characters every novel. In the first one, you got Miller, who's the detective.
I actually
they
really
meet up
like
with.
Miller too.
He's great.
Yeah, he's awesome.
And then Avasarla in book 2, who's one of my favorites, and I hope to see her return. I feel like she's going to return.
Yeah,
she's got to return,
like
right, guys?
She was the Miller of book 2, like the non-Holden main character of book 2. And then I felt the same way you did when book 3 started and there was no Avasarla. I was like, what? Come on.
Yeah, yeah.
Anyway.
I'm sure she's coming back. But also, and then there's also other great ancillary characters like Bobby and Prax and Bull, Clarissa. Like fun cast in each novel.
What about the science and tech? I know this was like the thing you maybe loved the most. What are some of the details that like really get you hooked?
Yeah, I mean, there's just a million things that make it feel good. It's really hard writing near future, middle future science fiction, right? Because there's a reason a lot of authors either go back in time or go post-apocalyptic or go way in the future into kind of fantasyville. And it's because it's difficult to imagine the future, but imagine it in a way that makes sense, that's compelling, that's like, here's how technology is advanced and here's how humanity is adapted to it, but it's also not that far off from what we're doing now. So they have to adapt in the ways that you and I, or the listener, would adapt in your lifetime. And I think they just nail it. That like on every level, really. The social world building is good. The politics, intersolar system, the biological world building, the idea that the Belters are longer, taller, have larger heads because they've been born in or grown up in low gravity. And you can tell just by the shape of someone's body which planet they're from or whether they're from the belt.
It was really interesting world building. I am so curious if that is real. I don't know if anyone would even know the answer to that, but like if someone was born in 0G, would they look different? I don't know.
Feels compelling to me. I believe it.
I agree. Yeah.
But and then there are other little details that I loved that are kind of that are also counter to most science fiction that we read, but that feel more realistic, like the weakness of some of the spaceships. The idea that every spaceship would be kind of an impenetrable fortress is torn apart here. You have the little moments of characters realizing that there's just like some mylar between them and vacuum in a tunnel. And if they rip it like vacuum, you're done. No more air. And that is a cool detail to build some natural tension. You liked the suits.
The suits?
I mean, I like the suits too. The combat suits.
Oh, the power armor. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm a sucker for power armor for sure. Yeah. Book 2, there's like a lot of like, book 2, they like introduce the idea that there's power armor, but you don't know quite how it works. And then it goes on, you find out more and more about it. And I don't feel like I'm spoiling anything to say that at some point the power armor does make an appearance and you get to see it get used. And it's just as sweet as you're hoping it would be. Anyway, yeah, it was great.
Yeah. And then there's, to list off a couple more, I loved anyone can kill a planet from orbit, just push something out of the airlock. Like the idea that you'd need huge weapons to do a ton of damage. If everyone's in orbit, you just kind of throw some rocks at the planet and it'll do a lot of damage, much like a meteorite or an asteroid would. Totally makes sense. Holden is parented by 8 different people, so they can have, per the government of the United States of the future, they can have some land to work on.
Yeah, and he's their actual, like, it wasn't like 2 of the parents had sex and he was like
Right.
their biological kid. They like put all 8 gametes in a test tube and mixed them all. And he's legitimately all 8 of their genetic child.
Yeah, and the gamete mortar and pistol, mixed them up, ground them up, put them in a stew. There's also, and then there's a particularly compelling scene to me in book 2 when Bobby returns to Earth. She's a Martian in the Martian military. And it's like, what would it be like to see Earth through the eyes of somebody who lived on Mars, and in that lack of atmosphere and in that environment to be out breathing in the world? How overwhelming would it be? So it's just a ton of great examples, and everything about the world fits together and feels internally consistent and consistent with our world, with what the future might be like for human diaspora.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, they did the same. They made, so our like big political forces that are always bumping into each other are Mars, the belt, the outer planets, basically.
The
and then
OPA,
Earth.
the Outer Planets Alliance.
Yeah. Something they did that's interesting, which I am not criticizing, I think there's good reasons to do this, but it is interesting to me, like in all future, as soon as humanity is off Earth, the assumption is like, oh, well, now suddenly everybody on Earth will be on the same team. And it's like,
Yeah.
would that be the case? I am sure that would not solve it. But anyway, it's good to have the political, like, they made the right choice here. But anyway, just because we go to Mars, it doesn't mean we'll probably be like, oh yeah, the UN's in charge now.
That's a great point. I think, yeah, it's better to simplify it for the story.
Ender's Game didn't do that, actually, in an interesting way. They were still all like even though they were having interstellar conflict, the countries were still squabbling. Anyway, total aside, but
That's true. Although, in that scenario, I felt like it was important Card wanted to explore that tension. And here it's more about what's going on outside.
Yeah, we've got our big bad external bad guy to deal with.
Right. And not to beat a dead horse here, but it's hard to find too much to talk about specifically without spoilers. And in a novel in novels that are just very well done. That the writing is good, they're compelling.
To put like a bow on that, an example we can give, obviously we have to read like a lot. We read a lot of books. Obviously we read all the books that we talk about on the show. We also read lots of other books to see what might be good enough that we think is like, yeah, we should tell people this is a great book and recommend it. And often they're not. And I have found myself like excited to keep reading The Expanse because I know they're going to be good. They're not like the most groundbreaking books ever, but like they're just good. They're entertaining. Whereas like when I go and read a random like Hugo or Nebula award winner, there's a 40% chance it's just going to be like actually extremely bad. Either the voters did a bad job or there was no good sci-fi or fantasy novel that year. There's like a 40% chance it'll have an interesting idea, but maybe they didn't quite nail it. And like, it was actually a later book that like took that idea and like really turned it into something great. And there's like a 20% chance it's going to blow my mind. It'd be outrageously amazing. But that's actually not that good a hit rate. Whereas here it's just like, I know what I'm going to get. It's going to be good. So I like
9
these.
of them, and there's 9 of them plus associated novellas and graphic novels, I think, and you can watch the TV show. Like it's something you can really sink into. It's funny because usually what we do for the show is Brent and I'll each read separate books. We'll say, I'm going to go this direction, I'm going to go this direction. And when one of us likes a book, that's when we say, hey, read this too, and then we decide if we want to do an episode on it, or something we've already read in the past. But I end up reading more of like the classics, while you end up reading more of like the Hugo Nebula Awards list. And the classics are equally like books that people are like, oh, they're so great. There's a similar hit rate sometimes on those. Like I'll read a classic and be like, well, I mean, this isn't very good. I mean, this is, it maybe informed this other book that I like more, but that book's better. So why would I? Anyways, yes, I totally agree about The Expanse. I think it's good to have something that you're like, I know what I'm going to get, and it's great.
Yep, for sure. Well, on that note, if people love The Expanse, what else should they be reading?
Yeah. So, for recommendations, actually, why don't you go first? Why don't you hit him with a little Alastair Reynolds?
Sure. Yeah. Okay. House of Suns by Alastair Reynolds is space opera, far future, actually, 2 million years in the future, but it's all humans and their descendants scrapping it out. And the action is just really well done. It's entertaining. There actually are a bunch of big ideas in that one, which lands to varying degrees of effectiveness. But in any case, just super entertaining, action-packed space opera, that you will like. House of Suns, definitely worth a read if you haven't read it yet.
Yeah, it's a space book. And if you're more into the kind of the grounded world building, and you want something that is the incredibly hard sci-fi end of the spectrum from The Expanse, obviously with the Mars trilogy by Kim Stanley Robinson, that is kind of a more, I would say, mundane look at the future of humanity's diaspora into the solar system and beyond.
Yeah, same thing though, like interplanetary conflict and politics. It's just like all the science is turned up to like 75 and the action is turned down to like -8.
And the academic conferences are turned from 0 into several.
Oh my God. Yes, the academic conferences. Okay,
What's
and final recommendation is the Murderbot series by Martha Wells. So All Systems Red, or man, I don't even know, all the Network Effect. Anyway, they are just really compelling, like space action adventure books. They're all, the main character is an AI murder bot who is just fun to spend time with. So yeah, if you want that like space fighting, if you want more space fights, go read Martha Wells. They're good.
Yeah. Well, with all that said, how about some post spoilers section on 1 through 3? In 1, 2, 3. Brent, what happens in Expanse?
Okay, so in Leviathan Wakes, Holden and his crew end up getting a Martian corvette military ship that they named the Rocinante, and it's an extremely capable ship that their small crew can handle by themselves. So that's their ship for basically the rest of the series. Holden and Miller discover that all this hubbub is over the protomolecule, which is a alien organism. It's a single-celled organism that was discovered, like, basically it hit one of the moons of Saturn instead of hitting Earth 2 billion years ago. And it's designed to like hijack and they think eliminate life on Earth. And someone has gotten a hold of it and is doing some nasty stuff with it. It's this nefarious company called Protogen. And they stirred up the war between Mars and Earth, and they blew up Holden's old ship to distract basically from the stuff they were doing. They seed it on Eros and set it loose. It's a station with like 1 million inhabitants to see what the protomolecule will do. Holden and Miller narrowly escape Eros. They hatch this plot to knock Eros into the sun. But then Eros dodges because the protomolecule can do some physics we don't know about. But Miller convinces Julie Mao, who is like the protomolecule's first host, who some of her like patterns are still in the protomolecule. He basically convinces her to crash it into Venus instead of Earth so it doesn't kill everyone. And she does that. So it crashes into Venus. They saved the day. Bookends. But Miller was on Eros, so Miller's dead. R.I.P. buddy. Sort of dead.
Is he?
Yeah, okay.
Now
book 3, you'll find out. Okay, so book 2, Caliban's War, is mostly set on Ganymede, which is a moon of Jupiter. It actually has a magnetosphere, so that's where they grow all the food, basically, for the outer planets. It's attacked by what looks like a super soldier who's been engineered with the protomolecule. Earth and Mars each think the other one started it. They blow up all of each other's ships and Ganymede. Holden gets sent by the Outer Planets Alliance to investigate, as is Avasarla, this senior UN diplomat. They link up and together solve the case. It's Jules Pierre Mao, this Julie's dad, actually, who is trying to use the protomolecule as a weapon and get paid for it, basically. And they shut him down. They win the fight. So Ganymede is back to growing food, and Jules Pierre Mao's in prison. Unfortunately for them, in book 3, his other daughter, Clarissa, is pissed off about that. So she's got this plan to frame James Holden, basically, and she sets it in motion. Meanwhile, the protomolecule finishes building this crazy thing it's been building on Venus. It turns out it's this ring structure that it launches, and it flies out to like the orbit of Uranus, way, way out in the solar system. So Holden has to go because Clarissa has engineered some nonsense that he has to go out there. He gets out there. Clarissa blows up another ship, frames Holden. He has to run away, and he actually runs into the ring. Everybody else follows him. It's a wormhole. So there's all these Earth, Mars, OPA ships all in this null space area. There's a big space station the protomolecule set up. They have a lot of fights. Some people have some bad ideas. The good guys win. And the protomolecule reveals actually Miller like embodies the protomolecule. He's like speaking for it now.
He's like the hand of the protomolecule. He's basically a tool to communicate
the mouth of
with
Sauron,
Holden.
except the protomolecule is not
The
bad.
mouth of Sauron.
Yeah, because he tells us, hey, the protomolecule is never designed to like eliminate life on Earth. It's designed to do this thing. It's basically like a von Neumann probe that uses biological mass to make these wormhole gates. But the civilization that made it is long extinct because something bad happened to them, and most of the other gates are actually closed. They've been quarantining. We'll have to find out in future books who destroyed this giant civilization.
Some of you may know already.
Yeah, if you've read more of the books,
Not us,
we're
though.
excited to find out.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's the rundown for the first trilogy.
Yes, these books, the dynamics are really good. Corey takes, book 1 is a little bit smaller than book 2 is a little bit smaller than book 3. So you're not, even though the books are kind of in the template we were talking about earlier, where you have, the opening scene, this is setting up the mystery. And then you have some new characters, and then you have what Holden and his crew are up to. The rising scope makes the series really interesting. And I think by the end of book 3, you're like, okay, we found out what this thing does, and you're excited to keep reading because now the gates are open again. And so you're like, oh, how is humanity going to disperse even farther into the solar system? And what is this going to do to the politics we've seen so much of?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I'm very excited to see where they take the protomolecule. My actually biggest hesitation with reading these books was from watching the show. I thought the whole I watched maybe the first 2 or 3 seasons, and I thought the protomolecule like plot line was hokey and bad. It was like in the show, it felt like magic. In the books, they did a pretty good job of like a sufficiently advanced technology is magic, basically, like that old saying. It felt less like just like hand wavy nonsense to me. I actually really like the protomolecule stuff. So yeah, my biggest hesitation with reading these books turns out basically that just like the way they handled it in the books feels a lot better than the way they handled it in the show. So yeah, I'm also very excited to find out what happens with the protomolecule.
Yeah, but you didn't like something specific about book 3. Which is why your rating was a little lower on that one.
So Clarissa Mao, who sets up book 3, they did the tension in book 3 slightly differently. So books 1 and books 2, in both of them, somebody does something bad in trying to like distract attention and split like the attention of the solar system, and both us and the characters don't know who the bad guy is the whole time. Book 3, they do it a different way. They do dramatic irony, where we know Clarissa Mao is trying to get Holden, and she tells us her plan right from the beginning. But they also sort of hint that like they're setting us up for like, oh, but this is also going to be a redemption arc for her, and in the end, she's going to save the day. And that's the only way they'll be able to like stop these whatever other idiots that we don't need to talk about right now. And I like 20% of the way into the book, I was like, man, I really hope they don't do what it seems like they're going to do, because it's going to take the whole book for them to do it. And then that is what they did. So I was frustrated.
Yeah, but I liked it. I felt the right way about her the entire way through. At first I was like, oh, cool character. And then I was like, oh, I want her dead. And then Anna, the preacher character, is the only one vying for her to stay in the mix, to not just get killed by somebody. And the crew of the Rosi justly forgives her because that's what they do. And I was still mad then. I was even mad at Anna, who's a great character, because she was forgiving Clarissa, and then Clarissa helps. And then by the end, I'm like, oh, it is too bad for her that she didn't realize earlier that, she was on the wrong path or whatever. So I think that whether or not it's predictable, if the ride is enjoyable and emotional, then it doesn't matter as much to me.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I'm glad it landed for you. Maybe I was just I think I place pretty high value on like subverting my expectations. And in general, they do that in these books. They just didn't as much in the third one. So I think that's why I liked that one less.
Okay. I guess I see what you're saying too. I put a high value on subverting expectations as well, but I think what I care about is like the grand reveals. So for Clarissa, I was like, whatever. And I just loved the grand reveal of the proto-molecule, that it's just like Miller's ghost is a part of a machine that's just for gates, and that you figure out that these ancient aliens had quarantined different solar systems, so the thing that killed them, which is obviously incredibly powerful, can't escape and get to others or infect them back in the day. And we just don't know that much about it, but we get enough juice to be like, that's what it was doing. This is a very cool reveal and a very cool idea. And also, there's a lot left to explore. And I think it also is very compelling that all of the conflict comes from the humans and that the interhuman fights, because it makes it so much more emotional than just like, well, aliens are going to kill us, like we got to get them. The idea that for example, the other villain in book 3, the captain, what's his name? Captain Anderson.
Ashford.
Captain Ashford, yes, he almost fucks over humanity by trying to destroy the ring because of his ego is bruised, basically, which is a super compelling villain reason. He's just kind of a people-pleasy guy who doesn't really have the guts to be a true captain, and just wants the politics and the prestige. And so he's going to destroy the station essentially because he's too weak to lead. And that is such a good villain.
Ooh. Also, he's dumb. After having seen what the proto-molecule did, his idea that he's like, yeah, we're going to soup up the comms laser and then we'll be able to blow this thing up. I was like, dude, you are so dumb. That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard.
Yeah, well, and he was petty. He just wanted his power back, like, in the moment, basically, and he saw that as a reason, he could convince people.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I actually don't. Yeah, you're right. I don't blame him. I think he was just like, small, petty guy. Cortez is like a dangerous dude. I think Cortez is a bad guy. I wonder if we'll get to see him again.
Because he gets just enough left of the line of fire from Ashford that he's still in the picture. You're right.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I'm also really, really excited to see what happens. And I agree with you. The meta stuff that happened in book 3 is really great. So yeah, it'll be really fun to see what happens next.
And it will not be fun if Avasarala isn't in it anymore.
They got to bring her back. Yeah, she's so good. Grandma who drops F-bombs and like has a Buddha statue. She's so sick. She's awesome.
Must have more Avasarala. No wonder she's in season 1 of this show so early, even though it's like breaking the protocol. Cool. Well, don't tell us what happens in 4 through 9, and we'll eventually do those too. But thanks for listening, and we'll see you for some Solaris. Get creepy and small.
For sure. All right. See you soon, everybody.